So, officially, I would like to welcome you to Navigating Your Web Dev Career, an AMA with hiring experts. My name is Chris, and I'm super excited to introduce our session today and to be chatting with Nia and Anton. And this session is especially crafted for people that are trying to navigate their job search process and kind of trying to make it through to the interview process or beyond. And tonight, we're hosted by TechTank, which is the organization that myself and Nansu are part of. And we're an active group of devs, designers, PMs, and other techies that range from mostly junior and early career professionals to seniors with over 10 or more years of experience. So we host job-related workshops and sessions like these, as well as study groups and in-person social events in Toronto. So if you're interested in joining, we do have a Slack group, and I'm going to plug in the link. Actually, if Nonso, you can plug in the link for me, that would be wonderful. Okay. So a brief intro. So I'm gonna pin Anton, who are our speakers. This is Anton and Nia, and I will also pin myself. Hello, hello. So they're both tech leads at their respective companies, and they both have 10 plus years in the industry. So, and then I'm going to let them both introduce themselves. Before that, just at the end of our presentation, we're going to reserve some time to do some casual networking, and I can create some breakout rooms as needed. And then we're going to go through some of the questions that I have prepared first, but feel free. I think, yeah, Nonso has already added that in the chat. So feel free to add there, and I will continue to, yeah, and we'll probably have, time for you guys to ask the questions yourselves as well. Okay, so let's get right into it. If either of you can start, if you can do, just introduce yourself, maybe like what you do, where you work, what your responsibilities are, especially when it comes to hiring.
Sure, I'll go first. Hi, my name is Anton. I am a tech lead and full stack web developer at the TechTank Institute, associated with UHN. I've been there for maybe 7 or 8 years. When it comes to hiring, I am part of the team that hires. Usually when we do interviews, it's me, my product owner, and a business analyst, and I usually am in charge of asking the technical questions. And however, when we hire, it's more of a team process. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nia. I work for, I'm a full stack dev, but I'm primarily focused on the front end with React and architecture right now. I am a tech lead. I run the front end architecture platform team at Healthy. Healthy is a health admin telehealth company based out of New York. So most of for hiring stuff for my team, I'm the main person hiring, as in I run the technical interview and part of the behavioral interviews before they get moved on into management. And then I'm also part of hiring like our EMs or upper like leadership for the engineering squads as well. So in fact, like I'm part of like the hiring for tech leads part of it. So a lot of the work there is beyond the technical stuff, is also sussing out like personality as well.
Yeah, that's really, really awesome. So thank you so much for that. And I just realized both of you are working in health tech. And I think that's very, very interesting. You two should probably connect afterwards. But anyways, especially because this is curated for junior developers like myself, when it comes to hiring for early career junior web developers, what do you think, if you can just give us maybe top 2, top 3 qualities or skills that you're kind of looking for when you are going through the interview process?
Sure. For me, at least, for my team, if I'm not hiring full stack, I'm usually I start out hiring either junior or intern. I don't care really what the resume says. My initial reviews usually is pairing with whoever it is, right? So, and it doesn't have to be a complex problem. I usually pick something that I don't know the answer to. And the thing I'm really looking for is how well can we solve something together, right? This like does tend to put, I know, junior devs in a lot of like uncomfortable places. So like I usually do this after like 2 meetings. I'll spend the time to go grab coffee, and if they're doing it online, I'll spend the time to like have chats beyond just the interview thing, just to sort of get to know them before getting them comfortable enough to just do that. So it's usually the collaboration and how quickly are they able to pick something up, right? Those are the 2 key things for junior devs that I'm looking at. And ideally, they're specialized in one thing, right? So like if there's something that I can throw at them and they can already start picking up, and it can be something as basic as CSS, where I can be like, you know what, you're good at that. Let me give you work related to that right now as we teach you up on the other, like that's still a bonus, right? But if you're like jack of all trades, but so junior you can't do anything, like can't take ownership of anything, then that's really hard for me to like place you somewhere, right?
Thank you. That's awesome. And Anton?
For me, it depends what we're hiring persons for. Is it front end or back end? I would probably ask a person first for their strength and try to quiz them in that area. I would also ask them about some personal projects that they worked on, and I would like to hear about some of the problems that they have encountered and how they solved them. Then we do sort of pair coding test. Usually we try to pick some bug that we have in our own software and create it on a smaller scale. I would like to see the debugging skills. I would like to see how the person communicates, especially. Even if they don't solve the problem, I want to see how they think and how they approach problem solving. Usually I make everything available to them, like the internet or whatever resources they want, and I encourage them to use it to the full, like they would do just at home. A lot of people still don't want to use it and still try to answer everything from memory, which is absolutely impossible in my opinion. So yeah, try to use all the resources like you would normally, because as web developers, we can't remember everything, right?
Yeah.
So documentation, API documentations, Google, nowadays ChatGPT. Obviously, don't ask ChatGPT to write the solution for you, but maybe ask the questions, that you would ask ChatGPT that would help you, on your way to the solution.
That's so interesting. So wait, just out of curiosity, would you let someone use ChatGPT then during their interview?
Yeah.
We haven't decided on that at work yet, but we do use ChatGPT at work to solve all kinds of problems. We don't generally, ask it to write any code because it is often wrong. But let's say when we do DevOps, for example, we do use ChatGPT for things like that. We're still not sure if we're gonna let people use it, but we do let people use Google, and ChatGPT is now better than Google. You can ask natural language questions for it. So
yeah,
it's not a final decision, but we've been discussing about letting people use it.
At least for me, on our end, we don't really care about what they use, right? Like with ChatGPT, especially because it's health, the thing we care about is making sure there's no patient information. There's no like client information in there. Besides that, or like no copy pasting whole chunks of code, right? So like we'll have weird, tricky problems, and I'm really happy to like have the person I'm pairing with do that, right? So like we use Tuple a lot to enable people to like pair together online. So they can hop onto my computer and start typing, or I can hop onto theirs to start typing. And that tends to be a way for us to like get that, conversation going through. And hey, like we use ChatGPT, like I use it all the time with weird questions. Sometimes it might be something I'm totally blanking on. So just make like what was it? We were writing a security policy. You don't do that all the time. I definitely use ChatGPT for that. So I'm expecting the same kind of behavior with junior devs and incorporating that into, like, that is one of the reasons why I personally like pairing on a problem together. It's like to get to see how what's their natural rhythm in trying to solve a problem, right? Yes, the portfolio pieces are nice, and I want to see portfolio pieces that have a lot of like thought put into them, not ones where they're just problem solved but gone back and cleaned up the code, right? But yeah, otherwise, like problem solving wise, use whatever resources is available. And like me personally, like whenever I have to go to interviews, I hate whiteboardings. Like the whiteboard ones, they always make me go blank. In fact, I've just now gone to the point where when people ask me to do a whiteboard, I upfront would be like, I'm gonna suck at this. We can pat right now on something, but I'm not doing this. And if that's a hard problem, that's okay. This is not a good fit for me. So if pairing is not something you're very comfortable with, like that's a good point for me to know, because that means you and I are not going to work together very well, right? And I think people should like filter yourself out just in that sense. Like set yourself up for success.
Exactly. I agree with that. Definitely a good point on pair coding, because we're going to be doing that a lot if you get hired together.
Yeah.
And I do want to see how you think and how we can communicate.
And like, mind you, that's not every team, right? There are other teams, other companies where that's not a thing at all. But for my team specifically, it's really important because a lot of what we do on the front end part is helping other devs get unstuck. So pairing is really important there, right?
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I think a lot of the people that are listening are probably, I hope that makes you feel better, because I think, there are no trick questions. I think it's all about, hey, here are the resources out there. We are here to kind of help you. And so these interviews are not necessarily meant to crush anyone's dreams and souls. It's really meant to, it's really kind of meant to, understand, how people work together and things like that. So yeah, I think both of you have kind of answered my questions, a lot of the questions in terms of like interview and like what you typically ask at an interview. I guess just to kind of add to that, do you have any, maybe especially like recent, or, I'm not sure how, you've probably interviewed many, many candidates over the years, but do you have any kind of memorable candidates or experiences during interviews that you can recall? For example, either like an amazing candidate who kind of like blew you away, that you knew it's like, okay, I want to help this person succeed from the get-go, or I don't know, like even the complete opposite situation where you're like, okay, this is not going to work. This is a nightmare situation, and it's like something that people should avoid, kind of thing.
I suppose one memorable person was that we hired was a person who communicated a lot. We gave him he had some Django experience, but he had no Angular experience. But we gave him an Angular test anyway, and we sort of explained that you have a view and then you have business logic in another file, and they were able to pick it up very fast and start coding right away, and and provide lots of solutions, and the communication was on the top.
For me, it was she was when she first started, she was still in college at that point, and she didn't have answers to a lot of the questions, so it was a no at first. But then she came back with like new questions, and she like went ahead and built it out just because it was fun. Like the pairing question that I'd sent her, or that we were trying to work on, like we didn't make a lot of progress, but like so I was like in a maybe place with her. But the thing that like surprised me and was like really interesting was like she took it 2 steps further, just built it out just because she thought it was an interesting problem, and then came back and stumped me with questions. I was like, I need to Google the shit out of this before I can respond. And yeah, we hired her because one, it showed just like she naturally just loved figuring that out. And even when she knew she wasn't going to be selected. She just figured it out because it was fun. And even after the interview process was over, she came back and asked for, hey, I'm like actually trying to solve this just because it's interesting. How do you solve this and this, right? And it was like asking very tough questions of me as well, which meant like she's gone much further along in that problem solving place. Like I haven't reached there yet either, right? So that was really impressive for me at least.
As far as nightmare scenarios, I've had a lot of those.
Yes.
A lot of people get very nervous and they start drawing a blank. Even though I can feel that they know things, when you talk to them, they know things and that they express themselves very well. But some people are drawing a blank when it's time for pair coding. In these situations, though, we do have a take-home test, because if I feel that the candidate is still knowledgeable, but they are too nervous to do a pair code, right there on the spot, we do have take-home tests, which they have 24 hours to solve. But then we will, we will grill them, or rather ask them how they solved it and what kind of problems they encountered, and maybe why they use this algorithm, or why did they use this style, so we do try to be accommodating in that sense.
Yeah. I think for Nightmare, this was like years ago. I met a dev. This was in the US. I'd met a dev in person for coffee, and he didn't know how to do a dot map, which is basic JavaScript at that point. And so I was like, okay, definitely not going to be a candidate, but we could like chat and still like impart knowledge or whatever. And the whole time he just kept correcting me. I was like, hey, we can still solve this. And he goes, no, you don't understand. This is not how it's done. And I'm like, okay.
Oh, wow.
That was interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for that. That was, I'm sure there's more, and maybe, we can go into that later if we have time. But Nia, you touched on this a little bit. You talked a little bit about the portfolio. Now, I know when junior developers are trying to kind of get themselves ready for, starting to put themselves out there and like applying for jobs. One of the things that I see people struggling with a lot, and they want to kind of perfect this, is how their portfolio looks like. So as interviewers yourself, how important do you think a portfolio is for a junior web developer, and what kinds of things are you like expecting to see from it?
I'd say portfolio is really important at that stage because you have no production code. Like I have nothing else to gauge you on. I don't care about your resume as much, but I really care about your code, right? Like if you've got that first job and you've shipped that production code, that's easier. But if that's not there, the portfolio is the only thing. I don't really care what language you pick or what projects you pick. I care about whether you do it well, as in like, it's not just working, but you've thought about how it all fits together and why it all fits together that way. So like the weather application is something everyone I think has a sort of like a very quick take home test. I've seen it myself. I've done those myself, but the ones that have impressed me were the ones where they've gone back and re-architected them to have reusable components, or like cleaned up their code, made it look concise, explained that in the readmes of like why they decided to do this extra step or what the intention was, right? So while reviewing their code, I could like see through their commits what they were thinking through, and two, how they were thinking of the code as a living organism, like as a application if the user was using it, right? Not just solving the problem, checking it off and moving on. And I actually do like walking through people's portfolios with them, right? So like I'll be like, pick your favorite, let's dig through. Why did you make these decisions? Why make this tech decision here versus this? Like the pros and the cons. And for a lot of those, there is no right answer. It's just, I want to understand why you made that decision. Did you look through all the pros and the cons? Do you understand you know, the gray areas of like, oh, these are if, these are not, kind of thing. Not whether it's the right solution or not. Like, I don't particularly care about that. It's just understanding your rationale for that whole process.
Mhm. And sorry, before Anton comments, just wanted to clarify, would you say, are you referring more to, for example, someone's GitHub repo as their portfolio, or a physical website that represents one's portfolio?
Like, at the end of it, I don't care what I'm visually looking at. I'm going to look at code, right? So if it's the website, I want to see the code for the website, right? Like, cool, yeah, this is beautiful, but how did you build it? Like, that's the whole point of the job, right? Is how did you build it? So let's talk through the code. Why did you do this decision here? So GitHub is really nice, just in the sense that I can go through their commits and start asking more poignant questions on like, oh, you went back here in this commit and we did this. What was the thought process there, right? And it's not like I'm looking for the aha gotcha moment. It's more just to see like, oh, yeah, you're thinking about these components as like a larger architecture pattern of like, once you set it this way, it makes things easier here, or it makes it harder here, and you're thinking through that process. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I agree. I think portfolio is very important. Applying to jobs is sort of like a lottery. You get hundreds of resumes. So whatever makes you stand out, put it out there, right? I try to stand out, even crafting your resume with a different template, and also having good cover letter, unique cover letter is important, I think. As far as portfolio goes, yeah, I would like to see GitHub. Definitely, I would like to see code, and I would like to see good READMEs, because I am going to clone the repository and I'm going to try to run it.
Yeah.
And I would like to know good setup instructions, so I don't struggle with anything. Descriptions, the features of the app or website. I will look at the code. I want to see good code reusability. I don't want to see duplicate code. I would like to see good comments on the code. If it's a web app, I would like to see how you handle responsive design if you're going to be a front-end developer. So all these things, try to be as descriptive as possible, but also not overly descriptive. You don't want to be commenting, code that's obvious, right? But something, overall, you got to comment the architecture. If you're a full stack developer and you have a database, I would like to see an entity relation diagram. So all these things, besides the final product that I'm going to check out, I am going to look at the code. So yeah, make sure you have something, and I don't necessarily want to see like some of the projects that are playing tutorials. So some people do tutorials and they put it up as a GitHub, and I've seen all those tutorials, right? I would like you to work on a project and not just follow a tutorial, because when you just follow a tutorial, it's not really learning, in my opinion. You have to work on a project that you kind of thought up and apply those things that you have learned. And so something unique.
Agreed. So like, even the ones with tutorials, if it's just a basic tutorial, I'm going to be bored with it. I'm going to move on. But if you've taken it a few steps further, right? Like the weather app is a good one, just because I've seen so many of those. The ones that stick out tends to be like the ones who've taken it further than those initial asks, right? Who've gone ahead and done the extra mile of like maybe setting it up with his mobile device or whatever. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. So I'm just gonna ask a question around, I think some of it was somewhat answered already, but for a junior developer especially, what are kind of the most, I guess, critical technical skills you think a junior developer should possess? Or so like the extent of the kind of the technical skills that you're looking for, or lack thereof, I don't know.
Well, for web developer, I mostly, they need to know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's helpful to, if they're a front-end developer, it's helpful to know responsive design. Version control Git is an obvious one, and I don't mean just coding. I mean how to do merging and rebasing is important. A lot of people kind of skip over that, and they don't fully learn the Git fully. Browser developer tools is very important for debugging, and I would like to see at least one framework knowledge. At our company, we work with various frameworks, but if you know at least React or Angular, that's already good. That's for technical skills, but for soft skills, it's also they're very important, almost as important as technical skills. I think time management is crucial, especially if you work in sprints and have deadlines. You kind of have to manage your time and set realistic goals for yourself, and just have a positive attitude.
Yeah, I agreed on the technical skills there. And I don't care if you know everything. Just pick one thing and get really good at it. Because like then if you're weaker on Git, that's okay. We can still teach you that, right? There's room for growth. The whole idea of you being junior is that there's a room for growth. I think even more than time management for me is communication. If you're not going to ask for help or tell me you've got a problem, I can't help you, and then you're going to fail, and that's going to be a waste of my time, right? So like, that's where I get really frustrated actually with junior devs, because like I actually have open pairing time on my calendar specifically to be an open, like, you know, place where you can come and bother me and ask me for questions or help. So that's a key thing there. And I've had like some really successful junior devs who like just record our Zoom sessions just so they don't have to keep asking me the same things, or like do quick video walkthroughs of what we talked about just so they have that as memory bank as well, right? Because once we've gone through it, the thing that I'm looking for then is that you are able to pick that up and go forward with it. You're not asking me the same question, like same over and over again, right? So that's I think the part of communication where it's important is like that first time we talk, you fully thoroughly ask all the questions you need to understand it. And the next time you're asking me questions, something new, it's not the same thing. If that makes sense.
I agree. Communication. Ask questions. There's no such thing as stupid questions. Clarify the requirements. And when we do talk, take notes, because there's so many times that, like Nia said, is we talked about it, and then 2 days later, they asking the same question. And from what I've started doing is review what we talked about, so they can kind of read over their notes, so that I know that they definitely understood. And some people say, when they don't understand something, they say, yes, I understand. That also has happened a lot to me. So if you don't understand something, you know, say you don't understand, and you'll try to explain again, or say you don't understand, say you're gonna go look it up, you know. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. It seems like for both of you, then I would assume you think communication is probably the most highly valued soft skill for a junior developer then?
Yeah, because everything else can be taught. But if you can't get over your fear to ask questions, I can't help you, right? Like that's one of the reasons why I try to do like coffee or like regular chats with a junior dev before I decide to hire them, because I want to see if we can have rapport on outside the jobs scope, right? If we can't have that rapport, like you don't have to be the bestest of friends, but like you need to be able to be comfortable enough to ask me questions and not keep apologizing about it, right? Like especially when I'm giving you space for that, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. Anything you want to add, Anton, before I move on to the next question?
I think communication and time management are the most important ones. I just wanted to add one thing is often junior developers cannot complete a deadline or try to do something perfectly right away. But because we work in sprints, I think it's very important, even if you don't finish the task with a certain deadline, you have to show your work still, that you've made some progress at least. Don't be like, I didn't do it, I didn't have time, show what you did in the time that we had. Yeah.
Awesome.
And tell us before if you're going to not hit it, right? Like I expect that to happen the first few bits, and then you need to be able to be like, hey, I'm actually not going to be able to get to that, and this is why, right? And then there's always ways to readjust those timelines.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. So I just want to ask questions about, a little bit past like the interview stage. Once you do hire a junior on your team, what do you typically see as kind of the career progression for a junior web developer, either at your company or from the experience that you've seen so far? A lot of the times I know people talk about like 30, 60, 90 plan, things like that. So, how do you usually see the progression for a junior web developer?
For us, we're not as organized as this 30, 60, 90 plans yet, because we're like a growing startup, right? So we've just hit, I think, our first 50 devs now. So we're still growing and we're still hiring. For us, really, it really matters on where do you want to go. Like within that first year, I'm expecting you to just be too busy trying to understand everything and learn and get comfortable and get good at your job with whatever the task may be, right? So if you're on my team, you're going to be front-end focused, definitely on the architecture side, right? If you're on one of the other feature teams, you're going to be more full stacky, and your priority is just going to be able to fix. The only thing you need to focus on is being able to hit your sprint deadlines more efficiently. That's really it for that first year. But after that, then the conversation really becomes, you're comfortable with the stack, you're comfortable with problem solving, and you're starting to take on bigger features or bigger problems to solve. What are you interested in, right? Do you want to stay in that full stack zone? Do you want to be more specialized? And if so, like, how do we transition you accordingly, right? So for example, the intern that I hired 2 years ago is now transitioning into full stack. She's in that middle zone. So that means I've already talked to other feature tech leads already about her being only part-time on my team, and the other part-time she's with another tech lead. So next quarter, which is like Q4, she's going to be fully on a feature team doing full stack work. So she gets to go try those things out. And then later on in her career, if she decides to come back to front end only or whatever, she can specialize again, right? But we usually have one-on-ones where you talk about that career progression, where you want to go, what you want to focus on, what you actually enjoy doing. And in that first year, lean into the stuff you enjoy doing and like get really good at just solving that problem better and better and better. Don't worry about like, oh, what's the next rung? The next rung will eventually pop up. But yeah, at least that's how we go about it.
Yeah, it's similar with me, I think. I think what I would do is first year, like you said, I would give different tasks to a developer, be it front end or back end or database, and kind of try to see where their strengths and weaknesses lie. And as we progress throughout the year, as I can see their strengths and weaknesses, I can then ask them where did they want to progress to? Do they want to do a full stack, or do they want to do a back end or front end, or maybe DevOps? It's different with everybody, and it's some people progress faster, some people progress a bit slower. So there's no set, like after 1-2 years you're mid-level, after 4 years you're senior developer, and so on. So it really depends on the person, and typically they need to have a few projects under their belt, various projects. At my company, gonna have to be very versatile. We work with so many different languages, just whatever language we need for the solution that we use, that we're going to use it. So yeah, I think that would be the natural progression of the developer. It's like I said, it's situational, really.
Yeah, I mean, mid-level, I think, is really just a junior who's now able to complete a task without any help. That's really it, right? You're able to pick up a ticket, pick up a feature, whatever, and just go ahead and do it. And as in what I mean there is like actually able to like write the code, not so much think through the process. Senior is when you can look at a feature and start thinking through that product as an architecture piece of like, how does this work in the company with the goals we have and like with the current other features we already exist? How should I plan out that feature so that product may have in the future additional features that comes through here, so there's enough space for that code to expand or contract or change, right? How do I set it up in a way that I'm not boxing myself into the solution? When you're getting to that part where you can think more broadly, where you're not just focusing on like chunking out code, I think that's when calling yourself a senior is a good practice. Because at that point, like you can have a conversation with product teams and like explain why, oh, this feature will work better because we already have something this way and it'll, fit in, or it won't work better. Like you're able to articulate those concepts much more easily, at least.
Yeah, thank you for defining that really, really, really clearly. I think now I know what I have to strive for, because when I go into product meetings, I don't know what I'm talking about at all. But at this point, anyway. Okay, thank you so much for that. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, how junior developers overcome challenges and kind of maybe some common mistakes that you have witnessed junior developers make, for example. And I think we've talked a little bit here and there about that, but I guess I'll start with what is kind of the biggest challenges that you see junior developers face, and what do you have any recommendations on how they can overcome it? And or if you have an example of a common mistake junior developers make, how do you think it can be avoided, or kind of they can better help themselves?
I usually see two. One is they get in their own head with the whole imposter syndrome nonsense. And the second one is they don't offer the help. So the first one, imposter syndrome, yeah, we all go through it. It's all part of anxiety. And I'm sure there's a ton of books out there. But the thing I'm always telling them is like, you're already past the interview. If there's a problem, we'll tell you, like have that faith. And it's our job as your tech leads to be like, you're not good enough. It's not your job to sit there and critique yourself. Your job is to freaking do your job. So put it outside of your mind. It's a waste of your brain right now. And I think that's really just building that confidence. And that ties into the second part is like, as you get better, start offering help when someone isn't like, we have a ask front end channel and ask help, like ask for, web dev channel or whatever, where the idea is somebody can pop in a question and be like, I don't know how to solve this, I'm stuck here. Be one of those people who pops in like, hey, I'm Googling this, I'm trying to figure this out, I'm trying to help, right? What that shows is like, one, you are willing to take on a new task just because you want to help your teammate. And two, you can get out of your own insecurities in your own headspace and try something, even if you don't know the answer to it, right? Because the reality is, it doesn't matter what level of an engineer you are, like as a senior dev, tech lead, whatever, you're still not going to know a lot of stuff. And you just need to be okay being like, I don't know that. Give me 5 minutes. I'm going to have to go Google it. So.
That's a good point. I think besides communication, I think there's two, I guess, bigger issues, but from a more technical perspective that I've been facing. One is, I would say, over-engineering, or rather developing something that wasn't in the requirements because they thought it would be a good idea.
Yes, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, yeah. So, and a lot of junior and mid-level developers think that meetings with product owners is a waste of time, but that's when we get the requirements, and they are our boss. They tell us what they need, and we have to do it exactly to the requirements. Try not to make up things, try not to put a feature that wasn't requested because you think it's going to look great or whatever, right? That's number one. And number two, from technical perspective, I think is error handling. A lot of junior developers don't sort of think about how the code will break. Maybe the network will go down. Maybe the database will time out. Maybe the user will input invalid data. All these little things you kind of have to try to think about and code for, and then write tests for it. So write tests for negative test cases, right? Test for errors, it's very important. Write meaningful error messages. Like, we don't want to, user on the front end does not want to see some obscure database error forwarded to the client. And a lot of people tend to do that and not thinking about it.
Yeah, and document why you made a decision. And like your point of that whole like idea of a new feature that wasn't asked for, go ask the product people. Maybe they just didn't think about it before you go waste time writing code on it, right? Because sometimes it's a valid thought. But because you have kept it to yourself and then you think you know better and you just start writing code, that's when you fuck up.
Yeah, that's actually really funny. Yeah. I hope I never do that. I'm
Okay,
actually
I've
learning
done
I mean,
It's all right. We've all done it. I've done a few of those. It's embarrassing,
Yeah,
but then you
me
get
too.
over it.
Same. I'm like, this is gonna look good. So let me just put it here. And then like,
yeah,
Anton, did you ask for this? This is, or they would say, you could have told us that you're gonna do this. So like Nia said, talk to your product owner if you have a good idea and you think it's gonna look good. Let your whole team know that this is gonna happen, because if people
Yeah.
don't know, then people are gonna get upset that you're not communicating properly.
Yep.
that's so funny. Okay. Thank you so much for that. I think just we are almost at 8:45, so I'm just gonna go on to let's talk a little bit about maybe collaboration. So how you kind of encourage collaboration amongst your team members, because you talked about how you will pair with the junior, but how do you encourage collaboration across your team as a team lead? For example, the senior or intermediate developer to also collaborate potentially with the junior developer. So yeah, if you can comment a little bit about that.
That usually starts with me. Excuse me. As in like the way I pick my teammates tend to also be like I do what I've done for them, I expect them to do for the next person who joins, right? So like it's not all on my head, right? So the new person who's joining my team, I've already talked to the intermediate and the other engineers about, hey, you're going to be helping them out, set up some time on your calendars, have that chat, right? Set up some time for pairing and having that open communication. We also do a buddy system for new engineers joining. The idea being that's your buddy. So if it's not like tech questions, if it's like other sort of questions, you can sort of go ask them, which like gets them relaxed enough to like then dig in deeper, right? But yeah, like I think the team Slack channel tends to be a good place of like constant collaboration, very quick interactions. But the other practice we do is we're all async, we all work remote, is document. So we have everything in Notion and we use Monday for like long technical discussions. So any decision we make on the tech side, like architecture side, we usually have it. I've like write down the prompt. I explain the pros and the cons of each of the decisions, and then have people collaborate in there. Like I expect to see responses and comments in there, and if not, I'll ping you directly as well, right? But like, I think the culture of your team sort of like helps that. And as a tech lead, my responsibility is to really make sure that everyone's comfortable enough to like have those conversations without me being involved, if that helps.
Yeah, every team is different. On my team, usually when we hire somebody, I will let everybody know that they will have to work with that person. And some people prefer a set time during the week when they're not coding. Some people are okay with the impromptu communication. Typically, if a junior developer asks me a question, I don't know the answer. I don't know everything. I will direct them to a coworker who specializes in that particular field, and they will have to talk to them about it, about the problem. Sometimes I sit in as a fly on the wall, sort of, and see how they work together. We also do something called learning sprints. Sometimes a couple of times a year, we do a whole sprint, which lasts about 3 weeks, where different developers learn different skills, and then they kind of do a presentation what they learned. But usually it's a collaboration. It's always impromptu. Send a Slack message to that person, jump on a Teams call, share your screen, or do a code with me, sharing in IntelliJ, or so that they pair code, they can share knowledge and answer whatever questions they can have.
Cool. That's awesome. So it seems like there's plenty of kind of collaboration and mentorship opportunities available for junior developers on your team. So that is actually all the questions I've prepared, but we've received a couple of really great audience questions. So we're just going to move onto that if you don't mind. So I'm going to read out the question by Mahin. He asks, I feel like the tech stack we work with on our first job kind of defines our career because we're likely to get hired by a company that uses the same tech stack. How can we not box ourselves by the tech stack and make it easier for us to jump to companies that use different tech stacks?
I'd say that depends on you. So I was originally in Angular. I absolutely hated Angular and then moved into React. Me personally, when I was in that junior stage, I was constantly coding with other stuff, just testing things out, playing with it outside of my job, right? So like after the first year of getting comfortable and understanding how to do my job, the next part was like, I was involved in communities and hackathons or whatever, just because it gave me an opportunity to go try something new. That's how I actually bumped into React, was in a hackathon with another friend, and she was using React, and my partner, who's also an engineer, was using Rails and React. So it just got me starting to learn that just because it was fun. And I was like, oh, it's so much nicer than Angular. So that's when I moved in. But I know at this stage, like if I wanted to hop jobs, I can always go into Node or whatever. So it's like, or Ruby on Rails. And even though I don't do all of that, it's very much like what they're really looking for is not what language is, how quickly can you learn something, right? So like the more senior you become, that's what they're looking at. Is not the language, is can you understand the logic problems and how quickly can you learn something? I mean, usually they give you a good chunk, like at least a quarter to 2 quarters, that's like about 6 months of time before, they're expecting you to do a full-on thing. People are reasonable, and if they're not, that's a good indication that may not be the best place for you to work at.
Yeah, at my company, we don't really care about the tech stack. Adaptability is key here because frameworks come out all the time.
Yeah.
Every year there's a new framework. There's a chance that we're gonna choose a framework that you never worked with for next project because it's best for that project. Or there's some library that only exists for React, or some library that only really good for Angular, or there might be a Vue.js or something else. So I don't think that whatever tech stack you stick for defines your future jobs, because if you want to be a software developer, it's a lifelong learning process. You will never stop learning. Absolutely. And that's a pro and a con, because no other jobs kind of requires you to learn forever.
Yeah.
So, and even during interviews, some people can come in with no framework experience, or some very obscure framework that they did. And then we will look at how they solve problems, right? They can always learn the framework on the job. We provide Udemy courses, business Udemy, so you can take whatever course you want and learn the framework. And you're given time to learn the framework, like Nia said, for 6 months or so before you're expected to, build the project.
Yeah, That's awesome. That's yeah. So hopefully, Mahin, you don't feel boxed in to whatever you are working on right now, because it's more about the adaptability rather than the tech stack itself. Awesome. I'm going to move on to David's question. He asks, if I'm working on a project that I would feature in my portfolio, how should I be documenting the process on GitHub and elsewhere?
READMEs are really good. Great places. Usually you can look at good samples on what a good README should look like on GitHub. I think there's like a list of some pretty ones as well, just because they're entertaining. Other things is like leave comments in your code, right? If you're doing something a little extra here and there, like go ahead and add a bit of commenting here and there. If your portfolio piece is pretty extensive, you can go steps further and try to do like on the front end, like storybook docs. I believe there's other ways to do auto-generated docs for the backend as well. For APIs that you're creating on your own, if it's REST, write your own docs of some sort, or if it's GraphQL, put it up somewhere so they can go find those GraphQL docs somewhere, right?
Yeah, I would say look at your favorite open source projects. Very good open source projects have excellent READMEs. They have excellent documentation for their API and for components, and lots of open source projects provide like playgrounds, like component libraries and such. Yeah, look at those. For REST API is you can have Swagger. Swagger is a good one, or they call it Open API, I think now. For GraphQL, if you can host a GraphQL playground somewhere, which then will give us access to the schema, and then we can see the schema and even play around with that API if it doesn't have any authentication in it.
Yeah.
That would be super helpful. I love GraphQL playgrounds. I can send some queries. I can test for some error conditions there. Yeah.
That's awesome. Very specific. Thank you so much for that. We have Samsi's question. What do you think about the gaps on someone's resume?
It's how you show it. I have gaps in mine. I took a sabbatical at one point. As a junior dev, I think I had a really bad first dev experience. I think it's a mistake a lot of junior devs do, is where they force themselves into fitting into a company because it's their first job and they want to learn and they want the job so badly. I made that mistake, and it was not the best place to learn. In fact, it got so bad I had to like take a year off from looking at JavaScript because it would make me very nauseous. But the way I explained it was like I did contract work on the side, right? It's how you tell that story. If you're going to sit there and be like, oh yeah, I have a gap and I'm be awkward about it, then it's an awkward story. But if you're going to be there and be like, you know what? I had an experience, I need some time, I was going to explore these other things, and you have a great story around it, sell it, right? So the way I still talk about that 2-year gap I've had is about the time I went and did all these random startup projects around Atlanta, right? I did get paid, I got paid shit for them, but they don't need to know how much I got paid. They just need to know I got paid for the smaller jobs.
Yeah, I agree. Have a good story. Don't just say you didn't do anything for 2 years. Yeah. Say you learned something, you explored different opportunities, you did some contract work, put something. It's not great to have gaps. So like Nia said, you can put contract work or freelance in that gap.
Yeah. And hopefully that is what you're doing with your gap, right? If you're just sitting on your ass, it'll be very visible in your code samples. And your GitHub history as well.
Awesome. Does anyone have any other questions? And if so, you can feel free to unmute your mics or even any kind of comments. This is your chance before we wrap up and move on to, okay, there's another question. David asks, in which skills is someone who has only coded on one's own bound to be deficient?
Writing code for other people to read. Your codes, if you've only been writing code for yourself, you're going to suck when it comes to writing code that other people readability wise, right? That's one of the big things that it is like to unteaching you the bad habits you picked up because you've only been writing code for yourself. And so one of the good practices there, to not get into that, is start having other people review your code, like read your code, and if they can understand and pick up without you explaining, that's a good example. In fact, that's one of the requirements beyond PR reviews is like when we make big architecture decisions in our team, I'll go find a backend dev who has no idea on the front end and force him to sit and read it. And if it takes him forever and he's asking me a lot of questions, I have failed at my job. So I think if you're only writing code for yourself, that's a really easy thing to forget about, that in bigger companies, there's 100 other people reading your code.
Yeah, I agree. Make sure you use descriptive function name, descriptive variable names, and comment your code. If it's a very long function, try to break it up into very small pieces so it's unit testable. If you are a junior web developer, do try to write some unit tests, because a lot of people write code and it's end up being one huge function after another, and you cannot unit test it, right? It has to be broken down in small problems. I think that's the biggest thing.
Agreed.
We have another audience question specifically for Nia. At what point did you decide to end your sabbatical from JavaScript?
It actually was very transitional. So after that weird experience where it was very nauseous for me for a while, I actually ended up getting a job at an agency that was predominantly women, which is really sweet, really lovely. A lot of the work I ended up doing was building out WordPress sites and building custom plugins. So that was a lot of like PHP and jQuery at that time, not a lot of Angular or React. But because I got super bored with them, they started getting me harder and harder projects, which meant eventually web applications again. And by that point, I'd found a job where I was in a very supportive environment. I was surrounded by really good people. I didn't even realize when I was starting to like React again and Angular again. It was just part of the job. I was having too much fun with it, right? But like me getting the job itself was random happenstance, to be fair, frankly. At that point, I'd been doing a lot of freelance and smaller contracts. And I started out as a designer, so a lot of the work was like still in the design field or illustrations field. And a friend of a friend was like, I need your help. Can you please help? Like, we're hitting this deadline for this agency I'm working at, and they just don't have any space. Can you please do something? So I just hopped in to help. I wasn't even getting paid for it. And they were like, we love you. Can you please start doing this job for us? And that's how I got that job, right? So yeah, I'd say like you stay in the space, and even if you decide you're taking a sabbatical, you stay within the community, you're helping. And I don't know, I've always thought like if you give kindness, you end up getting kindness. It's the same concept. So you're helping others or you're participating, you end up in the right place at the right time.
Awesome. So I'm just looking at the clock over here. We are 1 minute past 9. So I think that's where we're going to stop the questions. However, I just want to send gratitude to our panelists, Nia and Anton, from everybody here. That was mind-blowingly amazing. That was, okay. There's one last question. Are you okay to answer it?
Cool.
Okay. By Brandon, since junior developers rely heavily on portfolios when looking for the first job, are portfolios weighed as heavily as work experience?
If you have work experience, fuck the portfolio. But if you don't have work experience, that's what we need.
Yeah, I think portfolios are very important, but especially it would be nice if you worked with somebody else in your portfolio, because we do want to see teamwork and how you work in a team. So if you can talk about your experience working in a team on some project, that would be fantastic.
And for experienced devs, like I haven't updated my portfolio site in who knows how fucking long. It's there, it's live. I make sure it's live and I update, I think maybe my address. That's about it. But it's the same site I still use. But that's not the thing that I'm relying on for them to hire me for, is to look at my recent job on LinkedIn or whatever, or my resume, or even having that conversation with me, right?
Yeah.
And
I don't have a huge portfolio either, but I do contribute to open source projects. So whenever I work with the library and find a bug, I will fix it and then create a PR for it. So I mean, hopefully, if I am looking for a job, people will look at my GitHub and see that I'm committing to various open source projects.
Yeah, and I talk at conferences. That usually helps. So, because what does most people do? They Google you. So if you Google me, you'll see all the conferences I've spoken at, which then gives that credibility.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're gonna pause the questions at that point. Thank you so much again. That was amazing. I am so happy that this was recorded because I am definitely going to come back and listen to it. And thank you everybody who also came out and asked those questions. And don't leave yet. I'm doing a little wrap up and we're going to have a little bit of a networking session at the end if you want to stay a little bit longer. So thank you everybody for coming out. I'm just going to plug in TechTank's Slack channel again. If you want to learn more, connect with our community, or find out about future events, please join us. I think at this time, if Nia and Anton, would you mind plugging in your LinkedIn's here? So if anybody wants to connect with you, would you be open to that?
Sure.
Yeah, so they're going to be plugging in their LinkedIn here, in case you want to connect with me, although I am no tech lead, but I am also going to plug in my LinkedIn here as well. And I think Nia has also plugged hers in, and I think Anton's is coming shortly. We do have another event coming up in 2 weeks on Wednesday, July 19th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are going to be collaborating with Anna Miller, who is a tech career coach. So that event is called Mastering the Digital Handshake, a guide to networking and growth mindset. So this is, again, very much leaning towards junior developers, and kind of from more of a tech recruiter, career coach perspective. So I just plugged in the LinkedIn post about that, and this is the link. Oh wow, there's way too many links on the chat right now, so it could be a little bit confusing, but the recording will save all of these as well. So that one is like the calendar link for that, and that is again on Wednesday, July 19th. So at this point, I'm going to stop the recording.